maybe we should have more things in the list. It would be, please bring a pencil, eraser, and notebook. Sometimes leaving that comma out can make something very unclear. And honestly, this isn't the world's best example. So we do say, please, put the comma right before the end. All right? So any questions? Yeah, I agree. And the main reason for that is that sometimes you might say, and notebook and what's the thing that would go with?
Calculator.
Yeah, except it's a separate thing. I'm thinking something that would have to be.
Pen and paper.
Yeah.
Best ones are the food ones.
Notebook. And that's, I'm sure, true.
They are.
Do you have a great one that we should use that would show?
About orange juice.
At any rate, so in this case, pen and paper are kind of considered a unit, right? And so that's why it would make sense rather than having, although you could do pen and paper. Anyway, bottom line is, please put a comma before the end. Even if someone told you at some point
eggs,
that.
toast, and orange juice.
Say it again.
Eggs, toast, and orange juice.
Ah.
So I had eggs, toast, and orange juice, or eggs, toast,
and orange juice.
Which would be toast with orange juice on it.
Yes, it would be kind of like mushy French toast. So anyway, so that's real quick, and that's the kind of the only thing. I mean, you know, yeah, that's all I really had to say about the auxiliary comma.
Just do it.
Yes. Also referred to as the serial comma.
Yeah.
Speaking
Okay.
of eggs, toast, and orange juice.
Cereal. Well done, Adam.
No,
Nice connections. All right. Focus, friends, because this is where it gets serious, right? So, we know we've been over this a million times, but let's review. What is the purpose of a literature review?
Bring you up to date on the conversation.
With that voice.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's my favorite.
To bring you up to date. Okay. So we're bringing who up to date on the conversation?
Everybody.
Reader.
Us and them.
Us and them, right? So stage one is you need to be conversant in your discipline. You need to master, because you're getting a master's degree. You need to master the content of your field. So that's step one, right? And then step two is to then communicate that to everybody else. So that really needs to be in your mind constantly as you're working on your literature review. As you're reading the articles, your focus should never be, how many articles do I need, right? It should be, do I feel like I have a good mastery of this subject, right? That'll be your final definition. And then as you're writing, it's all about communicating, and think about the teacher down the hall from you who has not done this research, right? That's the type of person you're probably aiming your literature review to, is another teacher who has the same types of problems and questions that you do. What would they need to know in order to be ready to engage with your project? Okay? Lovely. Now, one of the ways we like to look at that is kind of telling the stories that other people have told. Okay? So you know lots of stories, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Without completely retelling the story, can you turn to a neighbor and summarize the vital points of a children's folktale?
Folktale.
Yep. A fairy tale, folktale from your childhood. So you don't want to use the same words, you don't want to go through every plot point, but how would you communicate that story to someone else? So find a partner. We're just going to do this orally.
No, they should have
And why was that important? Why should I care about that?
Well, I heard a version where they went out to the woods after they showed William and they died as they started.
Right? True grim version.
I don't know if that was the true grim version, but so there's this girl named Lazina, and her mom and her sister, Lazina. Her mom and her sister were mad at her, so she went to live with all these cats, and all the cats loved her because she was so kind and nice, even though the cats were animals, but they were always just mean to her. There was one about a cat though, right down here, came down, and was like, oh, they all love you. I took her to basically say, like, think of oil or the thing of gold. She said, think of oil. And he said, no, use her better. That's the gold. And then she sends her home and says, that the coffee girl that's her head to her. But don't let the donkey get raised. So she turns into the coffee girl, she gets a star for it. So then her sister, Pepina, says, well, I want to do that. So she goes to the coffee again, but she's not nice. And so all the little cats come to Father Gatchel. So Father Gatchel takes her down to the basement and says, which one should she be in? She says, well, he says no, and sticks her in the window. She sends her home and says, make sure you turn towards the donkey when you raise. And when the donkey reaches her switch, she gets the donkey eating on the donkey be alive.
Was that part?
I'm not done yet. So then the prince rides by and sees Lazina and thinks she's so beautiful. After all, her head says, sure, she'll come back and do whatever I need. She'll come back tomorrow and like have her chicken prawn back the next day. And realizes she's wrapped Pepinas in the paint and stuck Lazina down the well. But then when they drive past the house of cats, they're like, no, so it's just, yeah. So he goes back and gets the other one.
I'm done in 5, 4, 3, 2,
I didn't think so.
1. All right. So I heard a huge variation in what you were talking to each other about. Running on the continuum from main points and takeaways. Turtle and a hare had a race. Turtle lost. Take your time, dude.
Hair lost.
Whatever. Versus extensive retelling with all of the dialogue reenacted. Where do you think your literature review should fall?
Leaning towards main points.
Yeah. Okay. The only reason we would ever need to get into extensive retelling, you tell me.
Where nobody's ever
Nobody's ever heard of it before.
Which is why there's so many research articles on it.
Right. Okay. So maybe there's more than one reason. Why else might we need to get into extensive retelling?
If all the details matter.
Yeah. And
Bubble
when
sorting.
would that be?
What you're using
A huge
specifically?
research project.
Okay, it's the seminal research that if you don't know about this, you can't even enter the conversation. Okay, so that may take a little bit more extensive retelling than just simply saying, positive psychology thinks we should be positive. Right? You might want to know a little bit more about positive psychology before we go on. Okay. When else might we want to get into more detail about the studies that we're bringing into our literature review?
If you're using it in your project specifically.
Okay, so if it is like a piece that you're actually going to take that and use it in your research, so maybe I'm taking an instrument that somebody else designed and tested, and I'm going to need to talk a little bit more about that. Okay? Any other thoughts?
If we're backing up what we're saying?
Okay, potentially. A lot of times we can do the backup here. So
So if you're going into that further detail, I mean, is there a way to incorporate it into your lit review? I mean, if you're mostly on this side, the main points and takeaways, but you have to go deeper into something, does that take up its own section? Do you?
It might.
Okay, because you can't just like leave it in with the other stuff.
Right. Short quote, short
All of a
quote,
sudden
short
you're
quote.
like, yeah.
I have that right now. Usually what's going to happen is if you have that fundamental work that you need to talk about extensively, that almost always comes up at the beginning, right? Or it comes at the very end because it's going to feed right into your method section. So you can take your time and then support and saying there are others that have done similar research to back this up since that seminal work, right? And so then we'd have the smaller pieces that follow. More of a timeline approach. Okay, another reason we may need to get into a little bit more detail is when we're critiquing the methods of the study. So if we go in and we look at that article closely and we realize, decades of educational practice have been based on the baby Einstein research stuff. You look really closely at that stuff, and that research was done with a very, very small group of college students. That's who the baby Einstein stuff is based on, is a little tiny study that they did with college students. And then they say, oh, if you play classical music for children, they achieve at higher levels. Nope, they don't. Okay? Or we need more extensive research into that area. Okay? So that would be a good place, too, to get into a little bit more detail in saying the methods in this study, while this study's been used a lot, they're really quite questionable. Okay, but for the most part, our job with this literature review is to summarize the main points and the takeaways from the articles rather than to retell them. And that gets particularly important as we're looking at issues of plagiarism. Okay, we got to throw that out on the table, right? When we're taking the words from other people's articles and using them. This gets really tricky in lit reviews because you find those perfect quotes and you paste them in for later. And they're kind of in your outline and waiting to be used, and at some point you forget that they were quotes, right? Because we didn't cite them carefully. Or you change a word here and there, so I'm retelling it, and I've included my own words, but it's still really that person's thought, right? So plagiarism extends to their thoughts. So you have to be very, very careful about truly summarizing, retelling in your own words rather than changing a word here and there to make it not a quote. Okay?
So when I'm doing a lit review, am I not almost exclusively presenting another person's thoughts?
Oh, okay. So I see what you the thought as a complete whole, like this sentence is my thought, and I've stolen it and just replaced 3 words.
Wow.
That's more what I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's more what I'm talking about with regard to plagiarism. Because of course, we're taking their thoughts and summarizing those.
But we'll talk a little bit more about, I think we'll address what you're asking a little more.
Yeah, definitely.
To me, it seems like almost everything you would write in a lit review would be cited.
Sure.
But you're talking about if you basically quote it word for word with changing a couple of words or changing the order, that's naughty. So you need to give credit as a paraphrase or
right. And when do we do a direct quote?
When it's necessary.
When it is, there is no possible better way to say it.
I feel like this should be
okay. So really, they should be the exception, right? Direct quotes should be the exception, not the rule, when you're going through your lit review. So be careful with that. So these are just kind of some broad...
Or the rest of your project.
Yes. These are just some kind of broad rules, but direct quotes should be the exception, not the rule. You need to be very careful, even in your early stages of copying and pasting ideas, that you're very clear about which ones are direct quotes that you're saving for later and you might reword. But from the get-go, have quotes around them, cite the page number so that you remember a month from now when you're finishing your lit review, that was a direct quote.
And the biggest thing is citing your source and the page number up front will save you hours and hours and hours of stress and grief.
Yes. So let's talk about some strategies. We mentioned these last time. We talked about organization, remember? So we talked about getting that physical or digital binder going where you've got your subheadings as dividers and you're sorting things into them from day one. All right? Remember to be creating your reference list as you go. So can you remember the tools I taught you about last time? Mendeley. Okay, by putting your references or your sources into Mendeley, you automatically start creating your reference list there. What else can we do? What's that? RefMe. RefMe is the one that you can use to scan books. There's also a Chrome extension that you can add. So if you use Google Chrome, there's a Chrome extension that'll help you cite your sources that way. What else?
Google Scholar.
Google Scholar, my favorite. Okay, so create that reference list right from the beginning, but which references actually go into your document?
Ones you actually use.
Only the ones you actually use. Okay, so you need to check that very carefully, make sure you only use those ones. Then as you get into your articles, whatever method works for you for figuring out what you like. So if you're a highlighter, highlight away. Don't feel like you have to be all high-tech or or low tech as other people are, or whatever. What works for you? So I am an ed tech graduate professor, and I print and highlight. That works for me. Sorry to disappoint you all. Some people like to take notes so that they don't ever have to worry about it being a direct quote because they're rewriting it in their own words the whole time anyway, kind of a thing, right? So just whatever works for you as far as going through those articles, finding the pieces that you want to use, etc. Did you have any?
No, I was just coughing, sorry.
Okay, no problem. Organize, organize, organize. See, we're saying it over and over again. Must be important, right? So make sure that you keep everything really organized, and one way to do that is to use your outline. So hopefully you crafted your outline for your lit review last time. You have since talked with your chair to make sure that that is the outline that you want to use. You watched your video, the part 2 video. We're going to come back to all of these ideas in a bit, but hopefully you've got an outline that you can be using, and we strongly recommend that under each heading in your outline, you actually start putting in, copying and pasting in the references that you want to use in that part of your lit review. So you know exactly where to go to find the quotes. You know where to go to find the information.
I don't know if this is relevant for right at this very moment,
Please.
but when we were doing the lit reviews during the summer, oftentimes I'd go to UVU's library page and I would find my PDFs and I would read through them, but then I didn't know how to, because you have to put like retrieve from whatever site it is, right? If
Well,
you get it from the internet?
Not if you're getting it from an article database. Then you just cite it as if you have the print copy and it's an article.
So what's the difference?
The difference is if I go out and find a publication that's just online. So for example, the Horizon report that we read in our class on media use among 8 to 18-year-old students.
Mm-hmm.
That's something I go online to find, not into an article database. So I need to say, this is the URL I found that out and the date when I accessed it.
Okay.
But if I'm finding a publication that went through the peer review process, I'm citing it from that journal,
And
not
you
from a
don't
website.
need any sort of website.
No, but you should be using the DOI. Did they teach you what that is? Okay.
And Katie, while she's bringing that up, kind of the distinction is, what was its original form?
Okay.
It was in a journal. You just happen to be retrieving it
Finding
digitally.
it online.
And yeah, it's as if you download as a PDF or whatever. The other one is more of a, that's a website, and it was published on that website initially.
Okay.
Okay?
And in that situation, it would take you to that website and you would use that. Because what would happen is I would try to do the retrieve from, but people would have to log in, and they don't have a login, so they couldn't access the PDF. And so it didn't make sense to me why we'd even put it in there. So that makes more sense now.
Good. Okay, so the DOI is the Digital Object Identifier. So because so many of our journals and things are going digital, that means they're taking a lot of different formats. And so sometimes our page number references are going to vary from version to version and things like that. So the Digital Object Identifier helps your more advanced reader know really which one you got, so that they can kind of have the exact same version you did, basically. Okay?
It also gives like a permanent place where you can find it, right? Where there's some websites might host it for a while and then not after that. The DOI gives you a place where you can always go to get it.
Yep.
Correct?
Yep. Okay, so wherever possible, find that DOI to include. Okay, that should really be something that you're working toward as a scholar, to try and have every possible mechanism for our readers to access our articles. Okay? Right. There you go. Okay, so you're creating a reference list as you go. You're keeping organized and using your analysis method to just kind of be consistent so that you're not confused about why on earth you did that later. Okay? And you're going to use your outline so you're keeping track of which resources you want to use in each section of your lit review. Now, I talked with a few of you kind of after class about this last time, but I want to get into it with everybody for a few minutes. So go ahead and get one of your articles pulled up or pulled out so that we can have a look at it. Okay, so what we've seen happening quite a bit, in the past with people's lit reviews is that in early drafts in particular, we see a lot of quotes that then have citations inside of them. Okay, so they look something like this. You can't do that. Okay, how do you think they got a quote like that? From another article. So what happened was this student was reading the introduction of another article, right, of one of their articles, and there was this great reference to a Bandura article talking about how people should be nice. They're like, well, that is awesome. I agree with that. I want to put that in my paper. And so they're actually quoting it from another source, right? So we actually end up seeing that, right? So they were reading the Frank article in which they cited Bandura saying that people are nice or should be nice.
Inception.
Yeah, it's Inception. It's like, whoa, it's like a meta-lit review. Okay, so here's what we recommend that you do. As you're reading your articles, be really intelligent and strategic about how you go about it. When you look at the introduction of your article, so go ahead and look at the introductions of these articles now. Maybe they even have a lit review section, and they're going to have references to other articles, right? Okay, these are what we call your breadcrumbs. Speaking of Hansel and Gretel. Okay, so your breadcrumbs are those articles you want to go back and find, right? So if you're reading through that introduction and you see, oh, Bandura was talking about people who should be nice way back in 1986. So I should probably go and see that work because it obviously informed this work.
And in the references of this document, it should tell you where to find that article.
Exactly. So you go to the reference list, you say, okay, Bandura 1986, here's all the information I need to find that article. So that's really what you should be using the introduction of the article for, is to see, are there other seminal works that I should be including because they've been informing people along the way? Okay? So you should never ever be citing a source that's cited in another source. You need to go out and find that original work if you want to use it. Does that make sense? Okay, so we read the...
run across someone that says Bandura as cited in.
Right.
But don't do that.
It's poor scholarship. It really is. Bandura 1986 as cited in Frank. Like that. So people do it, but it's kind of crummy scholarship. Okay, so you should go back, find the original article, and read it for yourself, right? Because maybe this should say, or maybe this really says, not all the time, but sometimes when you like them, people should be nice, right?
But Frank didn't feel like saying that.
Right.
Frank wanted it to make her or his own point.
Exactly. So it's really best practice to go and find that original article, read it for yourself, and make sure that the conclusions that you draw are the same ones that Frank drew.
Do you have examples of what to or what not to do in your PowerPoint? Because, I don't know, I'm listening to you, but I'm like, I've been at work all day, and it's just like, I'm not retaining what you're saying.
Okay. So let me find a good article to show you here. And maybe does everybody have an article up?
Good luck. So while she's finding it, is there someone else who can kind of paraphrase this idea?
Thank you.
Succinctly. Yeah, Tina.
So basically, when you go to an article that's about stuff that you're talking about, there's going to be references that they've already used. And finding those references will point you in other directions. And if they've quoted something, you can't quote them quoting. You have to go to the original article and find that and then quote it yourself.
And Okay, yes.
So what if my point is that I also want to state that people should be nice? And if I just put the last parentheses at the end of nice and then just put Bandura 1986, period, and use the same reference that Frank used in his at the end of his reference site.
But you actually went out and looked at Bandura's article.
Well, so
Because don't
right.
trust Frank.
That's what you're saying
Frank
to us.
may have been misquoting.
Okay.
Yep. And
So
if,
that's why you need to go to the real Bandura. If you want to cite Bandura, find the Bandura article.
absolutely.
I have a question. I've seen articles where they cite Bandura and Frank with
Yes.
parentheses. Is that legit?
Yeah, so if they're both drawing the same conclusion, then you could say Bandura 1986, Frank 2001.
And your
They both
sentence
said
may have
that.
started with, many researchers have suggested that people should be.
And that's when you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
And
that
then you
obviously
listen.
wouldn't be a direct quote because they both didn't say that exactly.
Word for word.
What if they did?
Dang it! And reword it. It is suggested that people should be kind unto one another. Okay.
Whoa.
All right. So.
I don't think Jesus wrote any books.
You never know.
That's quoted by Mark.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay, so here's an example of what I might be talking about here. Okay? So what if we saw in a paper, some researchers have said that the arts are part of the, quote, employability in higher education agenda. Grammar, page 170, end quote. And then cite these guys, Pollard and Wilson. Right? So what you've done is as you were going through the article, you found this great quote. Oh, I want to use that. And it's cited in this article. And it happens to be from this other guy. Messy, messy, messy. Okay? So if you like that quote or you like the idea from Cranmer's work, go find Cranmer's work. That's the rule.
And then you just put that in your reference.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And you don't have to put them there.
And you,
If you don't use.
right.
If you
And
don't use theirs.
You may use Pollard and Friend
Okay.
for something else.
Okay.
But if you're citing Cramer,
Yeah, go find his.
get his.
Okay.
Is it considered just sloppy work or plagiarism if I just said employability and higher education agenda, Cramer 2006, page 170, and put it at the end of the reference, but I got it off of here, but I never even went and looked it up?
Right, so that would be when you say as cited in Pollard and Wilson. And it's just, it's sloppy.
No, like let's say I leave that part out.
Oh,
Just
then
cheating.
that's plagiarism. Yeah.
So is that, I was gonna say, is that plagiarism or is that sloppy?
Both.
Yeah, cool. But it's plagiarism at
Okay.
that point.
So
Yeah.
it does go to that extreme if you just use that and I didn't go find Cramer the exact place where he said it.
Yep, and I'm not even saying that it was Pollard and Wilson that quoted him in
Right.
this way. I just.
So what if
don't-
so I'm reading this through the article and I find Cramer's 2006 and I look on page 170 and that quote is nowhere on there.
Then do not use it.
Right.
Yep.
Okay.
Absolutely. So that's, again, why you want to follow up, go get the original article, because this person may have been a poor scholar, and you don't want to perpetuate that.
And for a reference, can I include both of them, like a grammar Conan?
If you're using the direct quote, no, you would just use Cranmer. But if you're using the ideas behind the direct quote, then you could reference both.
Okay.
So you would use as quoted in if the article costs $50 to look at. And,
No, you would use interlibrary law.
Yeah, we'll get it
I
right.
waited like 3 weeks.
The possible justification for as quoted in is if maybe it was a very, very obscure article and you just really can't ever find it, but if you can't find it, maybe it didn't exist. So as quoted in, we just cited and we just
I like it.
Okay, so let's get back to this idea of how you're reading your articles. So the introduction, you're really just reading to see, are there breadcrumbs that I should be following? Other articles, other work that I should be reading because all these people are citing them, right? So I need to go find those sources too, okay? Then skip all the middle stuff with numbers and t-test and stuff. Okay, because you want to go right to the discussion and conclusion because that's going to inform you of whether that study is even relevant to what you're doing. You do not want to spend your time reading through all the methods and results.
Or even all their lit review.
Which is painful, to find out, okay, in the end, they have absolutely nothing to say that informs my work. Awesome. Okay, so that's why we're saying, kind of skim through that introduction to see if there are some references, then skip the discussion and conclusion and look and see, are there ideas here that do in fact inform my project? And those would be the things that you actually cite in your paper. So according to Pollard and Wilson, this and this and this from their discussion and their conclusion sections. Okay? Then if you find that that article does in fact have some valuable conclusions for your work, that's when you go back and read all the painful number stuff. Because of this, right? We want to critique the study. If they've got these great conclusions, but then you find out that they had exactly 3 participants in their study, or they actually didn't control for any of the variables, right? Then that's, even as great as the ideas were that came out of it, it may not be something I want to use, or I want to acknowledge, now we're aware that this is a flawed study for these reasons. Does that make sense? Okay, so scan the introduction for sources, skip to the discussion and conclusion to get those ideas that you would want to cite in your paper, but then cycle back and critique the methods so that you can, as part of your conversation, say, this is a robust study, or this is a pretty flawed study, I'm going to need more support. Okay, hand? All right. So we're going to practice this for a moment. I want you to take that one article that you have pulled up, start with your introduction, and see if there are any sources that you think it might be wise for you to go back and find for yourself. Let's start there. When you're done with that task, pause for just a moment.
That was a term that someone specifically.
Joel's got his highlighting going on.
Love it.
magically smells like apple pie in here. It does. Well done. Okay, so for just a minute, I'm going to draw your attention up here, right? So when you see those references in the early parts of the paper, we know that we can follow those down and find the earlier references down here, right? In Google Scholar, you can also follow the breadcrumbs forward from this article. So I can click on Google Scholar where it says cited by however many. I can click on that and it'll give me all the articles that cite the one I was just reading. Okay? So that's pretty nice. Speaking of our friend Bandura. Okay, when you see things like that, cited by 13,332 other articles, you should probably read it. All right, so that's another good tool that you can use as far as figuring out which sources should I actually read. Look at those. Okay, so you can follow breadcrumbs from this one point, this one article. You can look at their reference list to go back to see what they're talking about. But then you can also look here to see who's talking about the one you just read. That's another good piece of information to know if it's a quality article, right? If it's cited by 2 other people and it's been around for 15 years, if it's cited by a couple hundred other people, that's probably a valuable article that you should definitely know about.
And
what if
yes,
you
if you
don't like I was on Google Scholar looking up all sorts of things. Mostly, I think the most I saw was like 14.
Right. And it may depend on how old it is, and it also may depend on how narrow the field is that you're looking in.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
and there are few people who have been read as much as Bandura or cited as much as Bandura.
41,046.
So, you know, but if there is someone who is that big in the literature and for some reason you don't have them in yours,
that's a problem.
What does that do to your credibility?
And these are the people, though, that you would ask your chair about, right? I mean, if you had a chair and you're doing a study on self-efficacy and they don't say the name Bandura, okay, so they'll help you know who those individuals are that you absolutely must have as a part of your review. That's part of the chair's job and your committee members at this point. So the reason why you have 2 or even 3 people on your committee is because your chair's not going to know every angle of your project, right? So if I'm a committee member on your committee, I'm probably there because you needed a person who will know the tech literature and methods, right? To help with whatever your main concept is in your project. Okay? All right, so did you find some references that you might want to pursue from your introduction?
Yeah.
Okay, so now jump down to the discussion and conclusions. Are there any valuable takeaways, right? So we're looking for main points and takeaways from that article.
It's just your apple.
Oh. Would you like
No, you could do it like broadly and then say and acknowledge that this study included multiple groups. Yes.
Nicole left exactly 3 dark chocolate. I didn't eat them all. Jeremiah.
What happened?
Dark chocolate.
Good.
He had the rest of my skills too.
And Jeremiah, I'm sure you can't get Friday off, but if you could, Libby Larson, did you see on the window she came in? Guest presenter Libby Larson, nature composer.
direct quote or direct application?
Okay.
Yeah.
I want to verify.
I should have been scrolling using
Music on Friday too.
TikTok.
Oh, for the ADHD conference, seriously. Oh, and arts too. Why are they on the same day? I don't know. What's that?
There are a lot of different things in the world.
So where's the ADHD going?
I heard of that.
Oh, oops, sorry. You don't get it.
It's been a battle since we started doing it. Yeah, Jeremiah, it's too bad. You should be looking at that one.
But Libby Larson's pretty nice.
Oh, Libby Larson.
Yes.
I thought you were saying with Libby Gardner.
Yeah, no, that's cool. No, but so, and Libby Larson, one of the cool things she's done is composed an opera of Wrinkle in Time.
Wow.
And because of the nature of it, there's some point in it where they're talking about pie. And she decided to do the entire composition based on pie.
Oh.
So she took pie out to so many
Why do you keep talking about pie?
Mathematical pie. Mathematical pie.
And then she would go through and she would pick phrases until she, and so that's how she identified. So each character is a phrase, based on a numerical phrase within pie.
Oh.
It's just really interesting. You can Google it and see what she
I'm
talks
pretty
about.
sure she just said these more correctly.
All right, did you find any conclusions, any takeaways that you think would be good to include in your lit review?
I have a question.
Please.
Okay, so I found this article and I really like it, but they're really, really good and they're backing up even everything that they put into their discussion.
Ah, punks. Is it a meta-analysis?
No, they did a study about it's about storytelling in early childhood, and about the kids that they acted out their stories every day in class. But then they're going back and backing up everything that they saw in the class with this research that they've done.
Okay, so in that case, you may have to step backward, and again, you go ahead and pull those resources, but you might want to step backward into the results section, where you could draw some conclusions of your own.
I'm just curious, are they citing Vivian Paley at all?
Yes.
Yeah, because it's Paley.
Oh yes, they've quoted everybody you need to know. I'm like, oh, like I took like whole chunks of like theirs. I'm like, I need to go look up this whole group of people.
Good. Yeah, so that's really what this exercise is about and what your lit review is about, right? You are becoming a master in this particular little slice of the pie that you are trying to learn about. And in order to do so, you need to find those other articles. But yes, in your case, you might want to step back into the results, and then you could verbalize your own conclusions from their results. Okay? All right, so now let's take a look at, Michael's already said, great, there's nothing here in the discussion and conclusions, so maybe I got some breadcrumbs, but this article's a waste otherwise. That's going to happen. That's why you have to look up more articles than you think. All right, now go into the methods and results. Okay, methods in particular, and critique the study. Okay?
So by the way, because printing costs money, it's useful to do this before you print, and then print the ones that are really going to be useful for you.
Okay, so spend a few minutes critiquing the methods. How many subjects did they have? Do you feel that they did a good job setting up the experimental environment and controlling for variables? Those kinds of things. And then as you dive into the results, look at the statistical significance. You guys know what all these words mean. So were they making claims like this was hugely significant, but it was just barely within that threshold of significance? So you take a look at this as well.
I feel like it's a W40.
No.
Right, so
What's that?
it's not
Did you already prove your real pattern?
They apparently
It's
all
already,
did.
it's already halted the dump though. It's already halted degree waste.
They're gonna have to take it all over again.
I know what Jeremy's doing next summer. I don't know, I'm wearing a jacket.
Down for me in my Alaskan education.
Adam, I've got a tool for you.
If I had like more than
Did you just call me a tool?
No, I said I have.
Oh my gosh, I was like,
This has been the second time today. Students that you work with.
Wow.
How did you?
Wherever you found it.
Wow.
Well played.
I have a cheater tool for you.
you have all sorts of little sources on the side. Mine are always like, not available.
You can even copy and paste that. Okay, here's your cheater tool of the day.
Is he gonna put it into English?
Yeah. So you can take sections of an article that just really don't make sense to you unless they have statistics in them, but maybe they use big words, and you're just tiny big words, and you can put it in rewordify, and they'll dumb it down for you. So it replaces all the really big words with possible similes. So you'd be like, oh, that's what that's.
What is that called? Reworded? Hang on a second. Earth shattering.
She's cool
Yeah,
like that.
use it a couple times.
Yeah, there you go.
I should probably give that to my students for when they read the Old Testament.
Exactly.
Oh my gosh.
The great thing about Rewordify is that you can click, there's a little button that says, would you like to learn the hard words? And then you click that button and it takes you through a little lesson that teaches you the hard words. Okay. All right, so let's share back what you found out as you critiqued the methods and the results. Did anybody notice some things that were notable, concerning? What was the N of the study, meaning the number of participants?
163.
Nice.
868.
Nice.
24.
24. Right?
Mhm.
Okay. So anything under 30 is a little bit like, ooh, we're going to need to make sure we back that up.
They did recognize that,
Good.
Well, was it 24 classes?
24
children.
though. 24 children.
Little children.
All right, so obviously the bigger the number, the better. Did anybody notice anything about the setup of the study that could be problematic? Bree, what did you find in yours that you and I talked about? Share that with the group.
So they did studies on different cultural groups, Latinos, African Americans, whites, Asians. What do we talk about?
So her question then became, can I?
Yeah. So can I just single it out to just Latinos because that's what I'm focusing on? And she said to just go ahead and use all of them because it gives a more concrete evidence that the study did actually work.
Right.
That's what you said?
Yeah, so she could say, here was the conclusion that came from that study, and be aware that it was a study of multiple ethnic groups, right? So she wouldn't want to say, according to this study, Latinos are affected in this way, unless they really just were focused on Latinos, right? So she would want to say, in a study of multiple ethnic groups, this is what we saw. So now let me find some research that's specifically targeted at Latinos that can help me with this, or that can help me draw the same conclusions. Okay? So look at how close to what you're trying to do the audience is, right? So as I've said, studies with the use of technology in classrooms, often those are higher education, secondary education. So sometimes we have to say, well, this worked in secondary ed according to this study, so we're hoping it'll work with Lillian, right? So we have to acknowledge that the audience was different here, so we need to be aware of that, okay? So look at the N, look at the audience that was included. Anybody see any control of variables issues that maybe there might have been too much going on in the study, might have muddied the waters? No? Okay. So sometimes we'll see that in educational research because they'll do things like we had one teacher doing one method and another teacher doing another method. Right? And then we might have that confounding variable of it was the teacher that made the difference, not the instructional intervention. So that would be one, that you would have to acknowledge. I did notice this in the study. Okay, so hopefully from that one article you now have some breadcrumbs to follow. You've got a conclusion or two that you might incorporate into your lit review. And then you've kind of figured out how to look at the results and the methods to critique those. So now we have to actually start on the writing process. Okay? All right, Dr. Escalante.
Uh-oh. Michael brought luck with that.
Excellent.
Stole it from his wife. So, we are engaging in a conversation, and there is a great little book that you are welcome to obtain if you would like. But I tried to do, I tried to kind of summarize the basics of the book. So as you start finding the things that you actually want to use, one of the things that students struggle with, well, let me go back just a little bit. In my elementary arts methods class, we played a game this week, last week, whatever. It's called Alphabet Story. And in the game, we create a story as a group, and each person has to add a sentence to the story, but their sentence has to begin with the next letter of the alphabet. And what that does is helps us avoid having every sentence begin with the or and or
right? And what we find sometimes is that people who are writing lit reviews, they can only think about one way to get us through the lit review. And so what the book They Say, I Say does is help students. So a couple of writers who were teaching writing found that students really struggled with how to structure transitions, how to introduce ideas, how to refute other ideas, etc. And so they decided to create some templates to help move that along. And so that's what these They Say, I Say templates are. So using the same article that you have been looking at and finding something in it that you might want to say, let's look at how these templates might be a little bit useful. So really, truly, as you are writing your literature review, and even in your first chapter, you are engaging or entering a conversation. And in that conversation, occasionally, particularly when you get to results and discussion, we'll be hearing what you say. But most of the time, you're hearing what they say. But sometimes in your paper, obviously, you're citing, here's what they say, and here's what I have to say about it. So it's a they say, I say. That's kind of where that comes from. So, one of the first things that you will be doing is introducing what they say. And so we have a particular approach. Or where there are certain things that we've talked about that you may not even have to cite because it's just general knowledge. And so that's the introducing standard views.
So that might be something like, it is often said that today's teenagers are more reckless than their predecessors. Everybody says that.
Yeah.
Right?
Did you say that?
And everyone has been saying it since Socrates. But so that's why we don't necessarily have to cite. All right. And so just look down through these. So the first part is engaging in the they says, making what they say something that you would say, that you are saying. So at the same time, I believe, or this researcher has found, that what Johnson and Brown and Stevenson said still seems to be true. Things that are implied or assumed. If there's an ongoing debate, as you look at your research, you may find that about a specific topic, some researchers came to this conclusion and other researchers came to an opposite conclusion. And so that's a great kind of thing to introduce into your writing, that you recognize that there is this debate or this argument, that some researchers are saying this and some the other.
Patrick, that's going to be a big one for you, right? Some researchers are saying that cell phones are killing everything, while others are saying they're the best next tool for education.
And teachers need to agree, so yeah, that kind of thing. What?
Capturing authorial action is like super important.
Yes.
What?
So, okay, so read the phrase. So, Johnson acknowledges, agrees, argues, whatever he does, that. So, what is it about that author? And a number of terms to help us move that forward. As you're introducing quotations, by the way, and I think we talked about this last week. Did we talk about block quotes last week?
No.
All right. When you're introducing a block quote, you would never say something to the effect of, so-and-so says, and then, so before your block quote, you have a complete thought ending with a colon, and then your block quotation. All right? And so one of the mistakes we see is that someone leads into a block quotation with a phrase, saying, comma, and then the block quotation or something along those lines. So just know if it's a block quotation, the sentence before it needs to be self-standing and a complete phrase, then the block quote, and then actually your pickup after. You would never end with a block quote, but your pickup after it should actually, if you were to end with the paragraph before and eliminate the block quote and go on, it should make sense. Does that make sense?
Yes, you did just ask that question.
Okay, when do you need a block quote? How long does the quote need to be? 40 words.
And some sources will say are 4 lines. So sometimes your 40 words may be short enough that it's only 3 lines. Then it's maybe up to you. But so I saw one the other day and it was only 3 lines, but it was actually 41 words, right? So, so there are some sources who would say, but if it's close, I would go with blog.
And let me interject here too on the introducing quotations. I see a lot of times where people put in direct quotes, and that's the entire sentence. You have to have some of your own words in there, okay? So either to
Leading into
introduce
it.
the quote or to get us back out of the quote. But you can't just put in a quote from an article as its own sentence.
And you may have a lead in as well as an out. Is it? Okay, so we have disagreeing with reasons, agreeing, but with a difference, agreeing and disagreeing simultaneously. Yeah, you might do that. Flip over to the back of that side, letting us know, let the reader know who is saying what. Johnson argues that, but according to both Johnson and Samuelson, blah, blah, blah. Embedding voice markers. So this is a conclusion. So these conclusions in which X discusses whatever the topic is add weight. So the embedding voice marker is saying Bandura. So for citing someone like Bandura, it brings more weight to the argument, right? So
Can you explain that? I don't understand what you mean by embedding voice markers.
So by bringing someone in who strengthens your argument more because they are so well known.
Name dropping,
Okay,
exactly
yeah.
right.
Name dropping, yes. Good. Naming your namesayers, in other words, there are some people, so here's the phrase they're using, obviously. So non-native English speakers are so diverse in their views that it's hard to generalize about them, but some are likely to object about that on grounds that. So if you're doing research about this and you're finding some people who support what you're going for, but other people who don't, it's important to identify them as well. So that's, naming them, the people who disagree with this.
Go ahead,
Maya.
Yes.
Adam was first, I believe.
Okay.
Okay. I was wondering, like, is it important to give equal weight to both the naysayers and the other side, or do you just need to make sure that you say, and some people disagree with this, namely so and so, whatever?
You know, it really mattered. What really matters is what is happening out there in the discussion. Do 80% of the researchers go this way, but there are a few who disagree? Or do most people disagree and you're trying to push, your agenda against the popular or the more common opinion? So if there are just a couple of naysayers, obviously that's requires less. Whereas if a preponderance of the research shows this, but there are these exceptions and that's what you want to focus on, then you need to be honest about it.
I like being honest.
Cool.
If the naysayers were only cited by maybe one or two people in the past 50 years, and it's just one random article you found, do you need to include that because they're naysayers? Or can you just figure this was not a good article?
You might want to do some looking into that, but really, truly, if you only find one article and it really is a long time ago, you might be able to disregard it. Okay. So, indicating who cares, establishing why your claims matter. Those are things that you will likely want to do. Not necessarily all of these, but some of them. So, writing exercise right now. From the article that you just had, can you write a sentence or two using at least one of these kinds of tools or templates? On your mark, get set, go.
Was the other word?
And before you do, because some of you, in order to be on the back, you obviously saw this third one. This other page is just a list of transition words that can be useful. So feel free to take a look at that as you're writing a paragraph or a sentence using some of these transitions, a couple of sentences. Yes. Part of the reason for giving you a number of these, and part of the reason them writing an entire book, just so that you don't use the same template 14 times.
Every sentence. Yes, every time you use one of these, you have to reference this book.
Yes.
Be sure to close from that guy a lot.
It's put in your acknowledgement.
That's like the thing.
Yeah.
Am I cold?
It's just you here, so.
So about one more minute and then let's share a few.
I'm jealous of your shorts though. It's okay. It's not my teachers. No. Say no.
Happens more though. Why is there a version for last year?
So they can charge more money.
They're hard to have.
There's 20, because they're renting the 20. Oh, but it's 24 to buy too.
So the top was cheaper than the second one.
Dude, you can just rent the Kindle edition for $10.
There you go.
Second edition is just
To rent.
Oh.
Yeah, you can buy it for $7.49.
There we go.
All right, anybody have something
I was
that you would
focused.
share with us?
I was very
That
focused.
perhaps shows us how you incorporated one of these templates. It might be actually useful to you.
Would introducing the standard views be a good one to use when you have all those multiple people that are referenced? Or, I mean, like if it's a topic that not a lot of people say about, but it's referenced by 10 different people in their citation, would it be okay to use in introducing standard views?
That might be the sentence that starts your discussion of all those 10 references. So you might say, it is often said that using candy is demotivating in the classroom.
And then cite 10
Now
people.
let's talk about all these people that say those things.
Michelle Obama.
Yes.
Cool. Another one? This one that you try. Oh, be brave. Thank you.
Try one. He said, these conclusions by Ruth and Bernstein in their book Sparks of Genius add further proof to the idea that creativity can be a learn and practice trait.
Good. Cool. And so my question is, does the template help guide you in thinking about ways to express that? Is kind of the idea. Yeah, let's do one more. Just one more. Dance.
Yeah.
You think. Thank you.
Bissell's claim that Native American reservations' limited internet accessibility rests upon the questionable assumption that they do not have the necessary infrastructure.
Cool.
Nice.
Cool.
Wow.
So, as you are writing in your literature review as well as you're writing otherwise, hopefully these can just be kind of jumping off kinds of points for you. In each of these, I will say that within the book, under each one of these, there are a number of examples. I just pulled an example from the template. So I'm happy to loan. It may be a book you want to invest in, or if you know somebody who owns it, you could steal it from them. Mike stole it from his wife. I don't mean steal it from him.
I didn't let her.
But if you're kind of feeling like, boy, this just sounds redundant. I was giving feedback to a student today, someone who's a year ahead of you, and just kind of had to kind of highlight, you just said that. Now you said it again, right? You do not, every once in a while we will talk about the fact that sometimes research writing seems a little bit redundant. By that we mean, sorry, this is kind of off the topic. By that we do not mean that within 2 pages we repeat the same thing 10 times, or twice even. We're not asking you to write redundantly. Where the redundance comes in is if someone flips to chapter 5 in your book, in your project, and hasn't looked at anything else, there should be enough information in chapter 5 to let them know what it is that we're talking about, without them having to go back and read chapter 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. So where it becomes a little bit redundant, you might say, well, I kind of already explained my methods in chapter 1. Right, but in chapter 3 you're going into a lot more detail and you're being more explicit, all right, and expansive. But otherwise, if you're starting to feel like, boy, I'm just saying the same, I'm citing different people, but I'm following the same pattern over and over and over again, you don't want to be doing that. And so the idea of some of this is to help stimulate some creativity and some variety in writing, as well as some power.
Okay, so speaking of the patterns that you follow, there were some that were introduced in the video that you diligently watched for homework.
Yep. I did watch that.
Okay, so turn to your partner for a second, and that means get up.
Today. Because
you're not being allowed to turn to the partner that's at your elbow right now. You need to find a partner that's across the room from you. Up, up, up. And then I'll tell you what to do.
And then find another place to sit.
Yes.
So you're both in a new seat.
No, you don't need your stuff right this moment, so we're just going to move you around. There are 3 dark chocolate M&Ms awaiting someone in the spray bag. Right there. There are a few skills left.
But I don't notice anyone talking about the milk chocolate M&Ms.
Right?
There's a discussion going on about M&M? Good.
They're so common.
You weren't at my elbows.
I'm going to sit here.
Okay.
We've chosen.
That's called putting your stake in the ground.
And if you don't want to sit down, you don't have to. You can stand.
Nicole needs a partner.
I need a partner.
Sit back there.
You made
Still your turn.
I think
Let's hear, what is this? Get your medals like this. What?
I thought our 3 across. So I'm like, hey, I have stuff to work off now. I just sat there because I didn't put my hands.
Okay, so you can see it. Maybe you've already started, but the idea here is you watched a video that talked about some different ways of structuring your lit review, whether it be chronologically or thematically or whatever. So turn to your partner and discuss what are some insights you got from that article or from that video, if any, and how do you plan on structuring your lit review?
We're discussing the lit review 2 video.
Yes. Yes.
And your own lit review.
Yes.
I'll tell you all about it. Please. Let's see. His shirt was a little outdated. Could have been his pants. No, I'm trying to remember. They talked about the different ways you can write your review. There was like chronological, by like subject, or something else. But there's like different ways you can write it. Or you can, some people like, review or like summarize everything that you try to and then it's just the biggest thing I took out from it was search flanking tips. You have your outline of what you want to write for your lit review. You go through your articles and just kind of line them up with your outline. So if I'm gonna talk about, in one part of my life, we differentiated differentiation with technology, all of my articles in that subject area, in that area, self-study, so
part of my literature self-study, teacher education, with an emphasis on teacher change.
30 seconds.
Changes in education, standardized testing.
And 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, share your partner's plan. How is your partner going to structure his or her lit review? Okay, so Jenny, how is your partner going to structure?
By theme.
By topic. Okay, and vice versa. Same. Okay, Tammy, your partners?
Maybe getting questions answered and going through subject matter. Getting questions and answering them.
Okay, so kind of a driving questions kind of a format. All right, Bree? Same?
But it's like these girls are saying too, I think.
Okay. Gentlemen?
You need to pick one of us to go first.
So Shola is telling me that he's got to start over on his
Okay.
review because it's following the same pattern as his introduction. So he's gonna,
As far as like comments I introduced.
Oh, well, talk to your chair,
All that brings.
right? Okay.
And for Kuman, he was talking about or telling me how he wants to do his on a chronological basis as far as the resources that high school seniors have on the reservations. And you said you're still going to go through that? Or? Yeah.
Okay, so back in the 50s, they had this. In the 80s, they had this. Very nice. Okay. Kina.
So Melinda is going to do the funneling approach with the big ideas and then get down farther. But within those big ideas, she's going to do chronologically.
Nice.
Double layer.
All right, and Melinda, what's Kina going to do?
Basically the same thing. We want really broad topics we're beginning with that we need to cover, and then getting down to our main. I was interested in the video. I didn't notice him talk about the funneling.
Yeah, that's because we're smarter than I
Yeah, you can tell by your dialect and accent you're smarter than him.
Right?
Yeah. You can put out your own video.
It's because I'm from Oregon.
Oregon.
That explains everything.
Right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And I teach 7th grade. Okay. Yes.
Chronologically thematic.
Chronologically thematic. Okay, so the opposite of them, where the chronology takes precedence and the themes within the chronology.
No, it's the theme. The chronology supports the theme.
Okay. Theme of
But in the
chronologic.
50s, the main theme was this. Is that kind of the idea?
Not quite.
But by the 80s, it had changed to.
Other way around. Storytelling has evolved thus. But that was hers. Oh my God. Okay. Oh, that's hers. Right.
I
Ours
was
hers
doing
has evolved.
I was doing what you were telling me to do.
Sorry, you're
It's the
right.
Direction.
Okay.
Hers is thematic.
Okay.
So, but again, kind of in the funnel, going from a large project into a small project.
Okay. Good. Jeremiah, what's Mike going to do?
I already told you.
Now I'm offended. How could you not remember?
Like by topic and subject matter, right?
Yeah. By subject matter. Theme by theme by theme.
Theme by theme by theme. Okay.
Same thing, except he's not sure he gets talked with his chair.
Okay.
I said nothing.
All right, Jeremy, what is Patrick going to do?
So Patrick is going to do the funnel approach where he's talking broad and then narrow it down.
Cool. Patrick?
He's going to ask a lot of questions.
Okay.
So he's just breaking it down by questions. Yeah. 4
Nice.
major questions that he's addressing.
Very nice. Okay. Luce, what's Adam doing?
Well, he will do it by topic and to go to the narrow that he's going to start.
Excellent. Adam?
So Luce is doing hers thematically. It's like she's going to layer it. So there's one topic, and then how it interrelates with another, and then how this other topic interrelates with another.
Cool. Fancier than you. Okay. Very nice. So we all have an idea of the big structure that we want to use. Good. Back to your original spots.
And how many of you noticed that regardless of your overall structure, funneling can be useful?
Yes. You can fail for at least
It's strange. I know.
All right, so this slide is entirely for Patrick. But, okay. The idea with the sections in your lit review is that you need to tell a complete story within that section, but then also kind of give us a cliffhanger and transition us into the next one, right? Explain why that is like Lord of the Rings, Patrick.
Because you have the Fellowship of the Ring, which is its own individual story.
Right? But then at the end, what happens? So you can go.
So then Gandalf falls down the pit.
Right.
And they're like, what are we going to do?
What are we
And you
gonna
don't know what they're going to do, but the movie stands on its own, but it leads into the next one.
There it is, right? Okay.
Did you guys know that they wrote some books based off of those movies?
What?
What? No.
I read them.
Where's that plagiarism?
Coming from Patrick, that was just.
That's awesome. Okay, so if you read the Lord of the Rings trilogy, you can read one of the books, right? And it tells you a complete story, and you're like, that was a satisfying story. But then at the end, Tolkien masterfully leaves you wanting more. Right?
Yeah. But I don't like the ones that are like, you have to go on to the next story. I'm like, can't you just do a complete story?
No.
Please.
No, you can't. Okay. So this is contrasted with really crappy books that are in trilogy form, that you read that book and it didn't ever finish anything. Right? And you're just left going, what just happened?
Or a television series that gets through the whole year and nothing happened.
Right. Okay.
We're still beating around the bush.
Exactly.
Do you have an example of that?
I don't want to.
We want to know now.
Okay, so what we're trying to say with all of this is, for me personally, it helps me to think about each section of my lit review as a complete story with a cliffhanger. I want to make sure that if I'm talking about technology and motivation, I really tell a story or paint the picture or catch everybody up, right, to what's going on in the literature with regard to technology and motivation. And that when I read that section, I feel like, okay, I know what's going on in that section of the lit review, but now you've got this thing at the end that's making me want more. What is that called? Cliffhanger, but writing, a transition, right? Okay. So that's what you're aiming for as you write each section, and that's our goal for this week, is to write one of these sections, or if you want to write more, you're welcome to do so. Okay? So then we get into how do we actually write each of those sections. What did they tell you in your research methods class last year? How do you go about writing a lit review? Was that just months ago?
Months.
How do we do it? One bite at a time.
I remember that part.
Good. Okay, we'll talk about the two approaches. I was trying to activate prior knowledge, but whatever.
How I feel every day. Did you miss Jeremy's whole conversation about?
It's 6 o'clock. Just tell us.
Okay, gotcha. Alright, so this may have been what they taught you. And that is, one approach to writing your literature review is to take each of the articles that you've decided to include and write a paragraph synopsis. And within that synopsis, you kind of give the context. Alexander Link did this study, and here's kind of what the study looked like. And then here are the conclusions that came out of that study. So you write a synopsis, a little like abstract almost, about that article. So we would call this format an annotated bibliography, where I've gone through all of my references that I want to use, and I've written an annotation, a paragraph that summarizes that source. Okay? Then, in order to build our actual literature review, you decide on which order you want to present those sources in. Ooh, I love dangling participle, sorry about that. In which order we would like to present the articles. So we go back through and we kind of read, what is the story that I'm trying to tell for this section? And in which order should I put these articles to best tell that story? Okay. Then you add some introductory sentences and some concluding sentences to wrap it all together to make the story nice and neat, and transitions in between those paragraphs. So basically what you're doing is you're taking those annotations that you wrote, the summaries of each article, sequencing them so that it tells a story, adding some intro material, transitions in between, and some conclusion. And that's it. Okay?
Right. You make it sound so easy.
Right? It's so easy. All right, so we want you to try doing that.
It's a question.
Please.
So we have a synopsis, right? So basically a summary of what the thing is about.
Mm-hmm.
Do we say, well, this, like, do we focus on, I don't even know how I'm saying it. I can't, I'll come back to you.
And by the
go ahead.
Would every one of these little synopses be a synopsis of the entire article?
Just what I want.
No, because it's
Just what's pertinent to what you're studying.
Just what you're pulling from is important.
Good. So some of those would just be maybe a sentence or two of Alexander and Lick came up with these conclusions, which are great. Others, we would go into the critique of the methods, for example, because we noticed might have been some flaws or some issues with the study.
That's my question.
Okay.
But not for all of them.
Right. Does it make sense for every single, in a study of 693 fourth graders back in 1986, this, blah, blah, blah. No, because sometimes all we have from that article are a couple of main points that we want to make sure to include.
Which are pertinent to our question.
Exactly. Okay? So, this is one approach that you can take. You go through your article. Remember, you're following our sequence that we talked about. So you breeze through that introduction to find your breadcrumbs, skip to the discussion and conclusion to find the main points and takeaways, and then you jump back in to see if you need to acknowledge some issues with the study itself. Or you might even jump back into the methods to say, this is a really strong study. There were 800 and something participants. So this is a good one. Right? Okay, wrap it up in a nice little package, and then we just kind of weave them together. So we're going to practice that for a few minutes.
Okay, this is just random. What is like the cutoff for a good study versus a not good study? 800 sounds like a good number. But is 700 a good number?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's going to depend on your research questions. Okay, so if your research questions are global research questions like the impact of poverty on school achievement, you better be studying really big numbers of kids. right? If it's how well does this math program that I just designed work, then a smaller number is acceptable. Generally, we really would prefer over 30. Okay, anything under 30 is a little bit like, okay, that's a small audience, but it's a good start, right? Okay, and then again, a caveat, unless you're doing a really in-depth case study, in which that's the nature of the beast. We're going to have a very small number of participants, maybe just one.
And if it's a kind of research that generally has a small number of participants, maybe you find 3 or 4 people who have done research on this, and so cumulatively, you're seeing something.
Yeah, to make sweeping conclusions from a single case study would be unwise. But to use that as one of many pieces of evidence would be just fine. Okay, so if you're finding a lot of small studies that are all saying the same thing, great.
So small is 30 or less.
Yeah.
That's small.
Yeah. Please.
I may be the only one, but this concept here is new to me.
Okay.
And as you were describing it, I was waiting for you to say, but that's not how we do it here. So I'm going to try to wrap my head around it. If I understand right, you take each one of these articles that are pertinent, and then you do a synopsis of of the information from there that adds to the body of knowledge that you're studying. And then you do that with each one, and then you just start to weave them together.
Okay. Yep. That is one approach.
Okay, that is
so you were
an
right.
approach.
The butt is coming.
Okay.
Okay. So I'll introduce the caveat really quickly.
Wait, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
What is the average length of our lit review? Like, what are we kind of looking at? What we should be writing?
What do you think the answer to that question is?
Ask your chair.
Whatever you
Yeah.
need.
Enough and ask your chair. Yes. So
You can't just always say ask your chair.
Yeah, she can. She just did.
Right? 20-ish pages, right?
In some cases.
I'm just
My chair said you need to
Remember
be
when we were
saturated.
looking through documents, chapter 2s tend to be hefty, but
I think the
No, but are we
document's
turning
about
this lit
25
review
pages.
in like by the end of the semester?
You're turning it in October 28th.
Okay, so here's my question. Don't we have 2 years in this program? Like we're rushing through this.
You have to defend your proposal for your thesis.
I know, by February.
Yeah. And that
So
you're
we're basically
so
writing
you
the
bring
whole paper by the end of the year.
the first three
chapters.
Okay.
And you want those to be as finished as possible because you won't have a lot of time.
Okay, and what do we do the rest of the year? Rest
You
of the
actually do your whatever it is you're proposing.
You do all the research, all the data collection, all the creating of what the project is, all the
program. Putting it
analysis,
together.
and then
Yeah.
writing it all.
And taking your other courses. So you've got all your other content courses on.
Okay.
Okay. So Adam, you're right. And I was gonna save it, but I'll just present both possibilities. And there are more than 2 possibilities. One way to write a lit review is to go through, write a synopsis of each of your articles, and then just intro, transition, conclusion, and that's your section. Personally, I cannot write that way because it feels too disjointed, disconnected to me. Okay? So I approach it in a little bit different manner.
There are a few cases where that's beneficial, though.
Yeah,
Right.
I can see that making a lot of
Like,
sense
yeah.
in some cases.
Absolutely.
Right.
Like if you're getting into a series of empirical studies about that, then this is a really good way to go. Okay? Personally, I go through and I write kind of the narrative of what I want to say, maybe even in bullet form. So first in this section, I want to talk about this, and then I want to talk about this, and here's the point I'm trying to draw from the literature, right? And so I kind of write it in advance, and then I go into the studies and pull those conclusions and quotes and things that help that flow be successful, right, and feel complete.
As you are doing your research and looking for articles, if any of them have lit reviews, I'd say read some of those lit reviews. That's going to help inform your own writing. And not all journal articles have a lit review formally, but they will certainly refer to and review some of the pertinent literature.
Okay, so let's take a look, just because I can pull this one up quickly, at one possibility. Well, that's not pretty. I hate these things. Where's the download button?
You will notice also that chapter 2 starts on what page? Scroll up just a little bit.
11.
So that means his introductory chapter was not 2 pages long.
What? His was
10 or 11 pages long, that introductory chapter to establish what needs to happen.
Yeah, and that's not necessarily common. Because his project is on empathy and perspective taking, he gave us some background knowledge about how he came to that.
But if you're if you're shorter than 4, 3, 4, 3 to 5 is probably minimum for your chapter 1.
Okay, so you'll notice there's an introductory paragraph here. Don't worry about that yet. Come back, remember, just like we did with chapter 1, come back to the introductory paragraph or paragraphs later and focus on telling the story in each section. So as you can see with his, looking at these first 2 paragraphs, although the first one doesn't qualify as a paragraph, which approach do you think he used? Did he use the synopsis synopses that were woven together, or did he write the narrative and then plug in ideas? Yeah, narrative plus plug-in on this section, right? So you can tell that because it doesn't say something like, in a study by blah, 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 right?
Right.
Okay. Instead, it says, educators label students. See, this guy backs me up.
So can you do both? Can you do the synopsis, right? And then do the other one paper?
That's what I do.
Yep, absolutely. So you can kind of, maybe in your section, in the introduction of that section, we do a little bit of narrative with some pieces to back you up. And then now let's dive into some of the actual studies for a few minutes and see what they really had to say about this.
So it's not just one set way of doing the literature. You can use multiple ones.
Exactly.
Because one section can be bigger, or you can go deeper in it than.
Absolutely. Okay. So in particular, this would make sense if you are starting at the big level, folks. So if you're doing the funnel approach and you're starting kind of up at the big idea theoretical level, doing a theoretical literature review with the synopsis of studies thing,
that does not work.
That does not work, right? In 48 years of research by Albert Bandura, nope. Okay, but if you're getting down into your narrow topic and you're trying to say, I have some pretty good evidence that what I want to do here is going to work, here's a study, here's a study, here's a study, then the synopsis with the weaving together is probably what you want to do. Okay? Do those 2 approaches make sense to you? Yeah. Okay. So we wanted to give you a little bit of time to try these. Go ahead, Kima.
So just a question. So I'm doing motivation, and that's a really big topic. And so Maslow's a really big deal. But how much do I need to get into exactly what Maslow researched and what his theory is? Because I have so many theories in there that it's kind of overwhelming as to...
Right. Those big, giant accepted theories like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which has been around and lauded since the 1960s, nope, you do not have to get into enumerating all the details of his theory. No way.
Specifically to one specific detail.
Right. Yeah. So those kinds of issues that are the big, seminal, everybody knows about them, I'm just saying, see, I know this too. Those ones you can keep at that high level and just kind of narrate. Let me tell you about Maslow. Now make sure, I'm going to check my references.
But
make
2
sure
sentences.
Right.
So not
potentially.
Maslow.
Maybe a paragraph or 2.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. All right, so we wanted to give you some time to play with each of these approaches. So even if you just take now 2 of your articles, do our approach where you look at the introduction, look at the discussion and conclusion, check out the methods, and then try the synopsis one first. And try to pick 2 articles that are related to each other and weave them together. Let's just play with that a little bit for a few minutes. Yes?
So a lot of my articles are just following.
Right.
Especially with the theater one. But I have some that are
So you've already done some of that, writing the synopsis.
Yeah, that's over here.
Yep.
That's why we're just like, oh, I know I'm gonna look at this part of this quote here. So, but yeah, like this one, I mean, it's like, and this is peer review. Yep. So, but it doesn't follow the same structure at all.
Right.
I do have classes that look sometimes.
Yep, me too. I don't even teach wrong.
Right. Okay, I just thought, I'm not just because a lot of mine are on drama. They don't have that kind of that same structure.
Right. So they're a little bit more on the practitioner side, but they are peer review side. Yep.
Okay, just sometimes with the exercise, I'm like, okay, and then I went back to this one, which is actually like, you can see every
yeah.
Yeah, and you should this is really, yeah, it's like seriously, this was, I mean, there were only,
By the way, if you haven't met with your chair yet, be sure to contact your chair and see how to follow it.
Yeah, but it was like taped from 20 times.
Yeah.
Really a lot.
Yeah. It was, I'm not sure I would say transfer. Just what's mixed. What did I say? So the observed story is like
Yes.
I'm like, that's not out there. Okay.
Well, but they're still in the data analysis and trustworthiness there.
Well, at least, yeah, so
So,
kind of results. The results are much less.
yeah.
But they're very specific. It's not a case study.
Right.
So,
Yeah, so, but if you could draw broad generalizations from those. And
right. I mean, and even what they did, though, they still backed it up by other people. I'm like, what? Broad generalizations are backed up by everybody else. But, yeah.
Okay, so yeah, you're going to have kind of a mix of the more practitioner oriented and the very heavy research oriented, and that's fine.
But look at all of those.
Yeah.
It's
like as many as you'll have for your thesis.
Yay! I'm so excited.
Never mind. And I'm assuming that sometime you'll drop by.
Sure.
When would be the best time to drop by?
So Tuesday, every other Tuesday, I set a meeting till 5.
Okay, good, because Tuesdays are fine.
And I teach 3 to 6 on Thursday. Wednesday. But,
Right now, just focus on summer.
This is my technological abilities.
Just maybe
Would
I
you be
can
able
your
to-
presence, or do you
available
need actually
Friday
just
afternoon?
Well, I believe so. Should be so it's confirmed. Oh my, I'm sure.
What do you have to do?
I teach an undergrad class from 3 to 6. But I'd be happy to do 6.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm like,
Cool. And or send me your stuff out. If you received, if you want to send me anything to look at.
I sent you one.
Just so they give you feedback.
it was just the.
No, I sent you a copy of my introduction.
Okay, and did I respond?
Again? Why? You never put my copy.
So the internet's been down, in and out, and up and down here.
Okay, so
Because
go
I
ahead.
usually try
It
to
was
do
sent on.
Can I try to
No.
Okay, not much more.
Maybe Thursdays, but not tomorrow. Because you'll be honest, I have to go to meetings.
Present to you about early Saturday morning.
Long reading one for liver.
And you sent it to my regular email, right?
To the EDUC.
Too late.
She judged you.
She didn't see them.
She prejudged.
They're saying the same thing.
And I will say that sometimes I don't do a lot of email checking on the weekend, and by Monday it could be 50 down.
Whoa.
But I usually go through.
That's a lot of emails.
I won't email on the weekend.
So they're more than
Well, okay, no, actually I remember reading it and I didn't. So sorry. I did glance at it.
I'm organized. I have all my little stuff.
It's right there, though, right? It has pulled up, but it closed.
So it's great if I started working on it.
So 3 to 5. Right. Oh my gosh, no. Sorry, I love those out.
Trying to go through.
Okay, so I apologize for that. I will try to get you feedback in the next 2 days.
Okay, so try going through the UV library or Pioneer Library.
Because I think the part that stuck in my head was you were working on your outline.
Yeah.
So I finally just wrote it.
So the first one I have, well, they're both on the 26th, but one has, so you just sent me one, right?
Yes.
For this last. Cool, cool. And, well, it'll, yeah. When I read it, I'll have an idea of what it is you're doing.
Okay. And then I'll just follow with an email. Schedule it tonight.
Yeah, because I haven't got the calendar, but yeah, it's about what time are you?
I can come anytime. We're done with school at 2:50.
Okay.
I can get away as soon as I can. I can be here. Probably better at 3:30. I email. Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Yep.
Now, in addition to summarizing these articles, you may also want to take note, kind of separately, of any really profound quotes that go with that article, as well as any kind of big ideas that you might want to use later, if that makes sense. Because again, you can both include a synopsis of this article that you weave together with others, and you can just bring in an idea that's from that article and say, this is backed up by these people's research. Okay.
I was listening and then I got distracted by what I was reading.
So I'll give you an example of that here. So you were asking me, can we do both methods, right? Bree, you were asking about that. So these two paragraphs right here in this lit review show you that yes, you can do both methods and weave them together. So he starts his section on social labeling with a big idea. Throughout history, people have been motivated to stay close to others. Happy 2005. No, in this study, blah, 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 right? It's just a big idea that came from that article. Then he talks about some other things. Right here, we've got a transition, kind of an introductory sentence. Adverse labels for females are just as prevalent today as they were during previous generations with no repercussions, blah, blah, blah. Now here's where that synopsis starts that he wrote. Rahimi enlists and summarized research on female and male attitudes, blah, blah, blah. So all the way from Rahimi and Liston here to the end reference there, that's a synopsis that he wrote. Okay? And that doesn't prevent him from citing Rahimi and Liston later in a short way, like this Hackney reference up here, just a big idea. Okay? But you can use both styles within the same literature.
So in the last, this is just a reference question. You wrote Rahimi and Liston at the end of the second paragraph?
Yep.
So you don't have to put the 2009 even though there's like 2 sentences after the first 2009?
So there's nobody else cited in between, and it's within the same paragraph. So no. So if you're within the same paragraph, nobody else has been cited in between, yeah, you can just say, just a reminder, this is all from Rahimi and Liston.
So if it's a big idea that you have in like 3 sentences that all come from Rahimi and Liston, you can just put it at the end.
Put it where?
At the end of the 3 sentences?
No, it needs to appear in the first sentence.
So
So you would, yeah, you would cite them at the beginning of that section, and then you would make it clear that the authors continued that, right? So you would use your little beginnings of sentences to help us realize it's still these guys you're talking about.
And then what the Rahimi Liston without the year, I can still put the year, and that's okay, or
Oh yeah.
not?
No, you still can.
Just to be honest with you.
Exactly.
And Jeremy wanted to know, at the end of the period, do you put double space or just one space?
Before you start turning paper.
Okay.
Give me typewriter.
I know, old school.
Typewriters require 2 period, 2 spaces after a period.
How old do you think I have a question.
Yes.
So I'm trying like the best way for you. So it's not more of you taking your quotes and putting them here, but more so like you're kind of summarizing and paraphrasing. But even when you summarize and paraphrase, you're just cite who you got it from. Right?
Yes.
Yep. So you're not necessarily saying, hey, here's this guy's quote, or talk about it. So unless it's a really, really good quote, but you're pretty much summarizing and paraphrasing the whole thing.
Right.
And
if they're really, really good quotes, then you say, you know, according to this person, here's the quote, and then here's what you could do a little here's what that means, or the implication.
So you really shouldn't see too many direct quotes in your lit review. And then other than summarizing and paraphrasing your own language to transition and move along.
Exactly.
That makes a lot more sense.
Okay. Say that to everybody.
Huh?
Say it to everybody now, because I think I have confused them.
Are you guys confused?
On what?
We want to hear you say it anyway.
Oh, I was just asking her, like, so for my lit review, I was trying to understand. So in a lit review, we're not just really, it's not about taking all the quotes from the article we're reading, but you're more paraphrasing and summarizing everything. And even though you paraphrase and summarize it, you still cite where you got it from. And you shouldn't really see that, so that means direct quotes in your lit review at all. Unless it's, like you said, it's really, really, really good.
Unless they have a direct quote summarizing their work.
Yeah, so summarizing and paraphrasing, and then you're using your own language to transition and connect everything together.
I like that.
Just makes so much more sense to me now.
Good. I'm glad that you are understanding it.
I just don't want to actually write it. charged? Isn't all charged?
Oh, we're videoing
Oh.
for people that
So
aren't
you hear
here.
everything I
Hi
say?
guys.